Welcome, Motenta people. 1960s curvaceous blonde bombshell in her beautiful black dress, her arms wide open, calling out Marcello, was standing bare legs for hours in the winter freezing water of Trevi Fountain. Retaking the shot again and again, she had lost all circulation in her legs, while her co-star was drunk. At that moment, Anita Ekberg was a trick of the light, the sort of impossibly flawless woman that can only exist on screen. So isn't her claim justified when she said, "It was I who made Fellini, not the other way around"? Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you're new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Motenta's channel. Anita Ekberg, 1960s bombshell, behind the cameras. After Marilyn Monroe rose to fame in the early 1950s, a wave of starlets with a similar look followed in her wake, including Mamie Van Doren, Jane Mansfield, and Kim Novak. Perhaps the closest to Marilyn's physical presence and bold sensuality was Swedish actress Anita Ekberg. Unlike another American Marilyn's clone, Mamie Van Doren, who dyed her hair blonde to replicate Monroe's success, Ekberg was inherently Swedish blonde and a more joyful screen presence. In the mid-1950s, she went to work for Paramount, being promoted as the Marilyn Monroe of Paramount. Can you imagine what sort of glamour, mystique, and sexiness is required to be nicknamed Iceberg and the Nordic Goddess? If you want to see that kind of refinement, go and watch Anita Ekberg's movies, where she shines with the lust for life that audiences can treasure for eternity. But for now, watch this video till the end to know how the most beautiful and outspoken star ended up being alone in a wheelchair. Yes, you heard it right. The story behind the camera is sometimes entirely different from what we see on the screen. So, the beautiful Anita Ekberg was born in Malmö, Sweden in 1931 and was the sixth of 8 children of a harbor master. She knew all too well how beautiful she was. In fact, it was her beauty that got the most wonderful compliments. When she went to entertain American troops in the 1950s, Bob Hope introduced her as the greatest thing to come from Sweden since smorgasbord. Also jokingly, he said that her parents had won the Nobel Prize for architecture. Not surprisingly, she started to get modeling offers, and later she entered the Miss Malmö pageant in 1950. She won the contest and went on to take the competition by storm in the Miss Sweden contest. And guess what? She won that contest too. After being crowned Miss Sweden, she flew to America to compete for the role of Miss Universe in 1951. At that time, Ekberg could barely speak English, but she was still a hit with the judges. Though she didn't win the Miss Universe title, she earned a contract with Universal Studios. In a year, she went from a young, struggling Swedish model to a real-deal Hollywood actress. Do you think that success can be easy for a beautiful face like Ekberg? No, it was not. For Ekberg, the initial few years were a jumbled mess. The Swedish actress intended to take acting lessons, practice elocution, and become a well-rounded member of Universal's repertory as part of her contract. But she admits that she spent much of her 6 months at the production studio riding horses. She made a few on-screen appearances before being released from her contract as soon as the law allowed. For her roles in Abbott and Costello Go to Mars, The Golden Blade, Take Me to Town, and The Mississippi Gambler, Ekberg received no screen credit. Despite all that, Ekberg was still a desirable model. When she stepped in for Marilyn Monroe on a series of USO shows, she received the attention she deserved and was signed to John Wayne's Batjack Productions. Throughout the 1950s, she mostly worked with Warwick Pictures in Europe and with Bob Hope or John Wayne in the States. Whether we talk about the Hollywood or Bust from 1956, in which she dreams of becoming a star, or her mesmerizing appearance in the pseudo-documentary The Clowns, Anita Ekberg remained a pleasant screen presence. Anita of Screaming Mimi as an exotic dancer who was a suspected murderer was entirely different than Anita of Back from Eternity. Don't you think that it was her amazing performance and not just her beautiful face that was truly admired by her fans? Well, we cannot deny that she was an irresistible beauty, With her honey blonde hair, luminous skin, clear ice blue eyes, and voluptuous figure, her performance always becomes more mesmerizing. However, there was more to Ekberg than a glowing face, epic eyebrows, a shapely frame, and her sensual on-screen appearance. Do you know what that was? Well, it was her sharp tongue. She attacked the violence of modern cinema. It's vulgar, disgusting. Where's the elegance, the mystery, the romance? In 1960, she was photographed threatening the paparazzi with a bow and arrow. Despite being that bold and beautiful Hollywood, well, America really, wasn't working out for her. At least it was not working out the way she'd hoped as an actress. Perhaps she'd burned too many bridges with her endless bad-mouthing of showbiz types. She managed to overshare negative stuff, and it likely did her in. Finally, she decided to move to Italy, a country that always had a special connection for her, and she considered Italy home for the rest of her life. Well, the picture to take her to Rome for the first time was War and Peace, but her iconic role was yet to come. Leaving America proved to be her best decision, and she found her best role in her favorite Rome. There, she met Federico Fellini, who hired her in the role of Sylvia Rank in La Dolce Vita on the spot. Did you know that they couldn't even speak the same language at the time? However, she claimed that they got along splendidly. La Dolce Vita became her signature film, and audiences fell in love with the dream woman of Marcello Mastroianni. Ekberg and Marcello Mastroianni had amazing on-screen chemistry in La Dolce Vita. Whether the two had an affair or it was trumped up by gossip remains a mystery. Well, what's worth remembering is her scene in the Trevi Fountain. As sensual as the scene is, at the time of filming it was chilling. Ekberg recalled shooting the scene in the Trevi Fountain in Rome. She said it was shot in February. The water in the fountain was cold, and Mastroianni was falling over into the fountain drunk on vodka. And there I was freezing, she said. They had to lift me out of the water because I couldn't feel my legs anymore. I had seen that scene a few times, maybe too many times. I can't stand watching it anymore. But it was beautiful at the time, she said. Her curves, the water, that dress. Surely, actual women cannot assume a form that verges so brazenly close to divinity. Indeed, the sort of woman for whom the moving picture was invented in the first place. La Dolce Vita indeed was an iconic role, but there's another special thing related to it. Can you guess it? Well, through this movie, she found her true friend and admirer, Federico Fellini. He never hesitated to publicly praise Ekberg's sensual beauty, describing the Swedish cover girl as a gift of God, deserving of adoration. While Ekberg also admired Fellini, when the media would mention to her that he did a lot for her career, she would answer that she did a lot for his career too. Does it sound ungrateful? No, she wasn't ungrateful at all, but she knew her worth. In fact, she did acknowledge his important contribution, but purred, "Oh, darling, people are always discovering me." 2 years after La Dolce Vita, Anita Ekberg was back working with Italian director Federico Fellini once more on Boccaccio 70. Audiences were simply fascinated by one of its episodes, The Temptation of Dr. Antonio, in which there was this beautiful, tall, voluptuous, big-breasted giant of a woman. There is this character, an elderly citizen, who is fed up with too much immorality in the form of indecent content in print. One fine morning as he looks out his bedroom window, he was horrified to find a billboard of Anita Ekberg advertising drink more milk. It shows a huge Anita Ekberg lying provocatively beside a milk bottle. He goes from one authority to another to have it removed, but to no avail. And at one point, his umbrella falls between her breasts. Can you imagine his struggle to retrieve his umbrella and then getting out of the precarious position that he was in? Now, it's understandable why Anita loved her own breasts that were, massive, and was deeply affected by a huge photograph of her own curves in that mesmerizing film. They gave her great womanliness, and they no doubt contributed to her many love affairs. Throughout her career, the beautiful actress was dated by some of the world's most eligible men, including Frank Sinatra, Fiat boss Gianni Agnelli, Errol Flynn, and Yul Brynner. Film contracts and money poured in, and she was the toast of Hollywood and leader of Italy's glitterati. She worked with such diverse actors as Bob Hope, Victor Mature, Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis, Sterling Hayden, and Jack Palance, and she had affairs with most of them, and a few of her other co-stars as well. Her name was also linked with Howard Hughes, Gary Cooper, Tyrone Power, and Rod Taylor. Rod Taylor admitted himself and tells in his autobiography of their romantic 2-year relationship in the early 60s, when they considered themselves engaged. When she married British actor Anthony Steele, she was 24 years old and was at the height of her fame in Italy. While Anthony Steele was virtually unknown to American moviegoers, she may have gotten him a role in Valerie, a Western they made with Sterling Hayden. Her marriage to Steele didn't last too long, mainly because he caved under the pressure of being Mr. Ekberg. It couldn't have been easy being married to her. Steele's drinking was out of control, and he was extremely jealous of anyone who talked to his gorgeous Scandinavian wife. In 2000, she explained, "He was a jealous man who always picked fights with any man who approached me, and in our last meeting, he borrowed $100,000 from me, which he never paid back." Then in 1963, she married American actor Rick Van Nutter that lasted for 12 years until 1975. It was her longest and final stab at marital bliss. Ekberg once confessed that her only regret in life was never having children. "I would have liked to have had a child, preferably a son," she was quoted as saying. "It didn't turn out that way. That's life. You just have to accept it." Yes, it was her only regret, but not the only misfortune. The 70s is an era full of unfortunate events in her life. Her career shifted downward as she took roles in European B-movies like Gold of the Amazon Women and Killer Nun. Then divorced from her second husband, Rick Van Nutter. And yes, how can we forget about the day when her villa was robbed? In 2002, after working for 5 decades, she officially retired from acting. As she grew older, she became increasingly introverted and ultimately moved to a nursing home in Rome, where she started to live alone with her beloved dogs. On her 80th birthday in 2011, she was interviewed by an Italian newspaper, and it turned out that she was no longer living a beautiful life. She said she suffered from one illness after another, and she was in and out of clinics. Ekberg broke her hip bone after her Great Danes bounded indoors, knocking her down, she explained. Hip surgery was not successful. Then the other one made it worse. She was shattered after spending 3 months in a hospital with a broken hip. She hoped a new hip operation may take her off the crutches and out of the hated wheelchair. And switching to that wheelchair was not the only tragedy of her life. History repeated, and once again she was robbed of jewelry and furniture. While she was in the hospital, her villa caught on fire. It was badly destroyed in a fire, after which she had to move to a rest home. She applied for financial assistance from the Fellini Foundation, but it was not seemingly helpful. Her expense as a celebrity guest at the opening of this unique Fellini retrospective at Amsterdam's Eye Film Museum was not publicized, but an employee calls it generous. Ekberg worked hard for that fee in Amsterdam, dragged in her wheelchair from floor to floor, overheard asking plaintively, "What do you want me to do now?" from one TV interview to the next. When she was asked about the divas of the screen of her era, she jokingly said, "I am the only one still left, and the only one working. There are no real actresses now to compare with my day. It is all completely different. Discos are showing movies. You watch them on the internet. It has all changed so much." Ekberg claimed that she had never undergone plastic surgery. Well, she didn't need any surgery, ever. Ekberg believed women who do that are crazy. Forget about the surgeons lifting things. Each age has its own charm. It's all about living life to the full. She said some beautiful words. "Age is a state of mind. Who is growing old? I am certainly not. My mind is as clear as when I was 20. From a height of fame and glamour, reaching a wheelchair in a nursing home, she was still optimistic. At that stage of her life, she admitted to feeling a bit lonely. She had no regrets. She said, "I have no regrets. I have loved, cried, and been mad with happiness. I have won and I have lost. Arching penciled eyebrows above expressive, beautiful wrinkled eyes, trembling and impatient arm, implying that she wants to move on. Now 82 years old Ekberg is pushed in a wheelchair through a large dark space dedicated to a Fellini pageant. It was probably the last time she was the focus of flashing photographers' lenses. She stares at the wall covered in international screen and fashion magazine covers and posters, showing off the voluptuous beauty. Once famed for her mesmerizing charm and chic style that inspired the fashion houses, she crisply tells the film museum curator, "You even have more photographs of me than I have of myself. I see you don't have any of me with my dogs, though. That's a shame." Then she looks into the camera, and the photographer wants her to point to herself at a huge Dolce Vita film advertisement. It is such a nostalgic moment. This contrast between fabulous youthful beauty and physically frail octogenarians is stunning. Finally, Miss Sweden left the world on January 11, 2015, from complications arising from her earlier hospital stays. After decades of life from Sweden, Ekberg's cremated remains were returned to her country, where she's buried in the cemetery of Skåne Church. Yes, at the time of death she was living alone with her dogs, but isn't it enough that she lived life to its fullest and had no regrets? Anita Ekberg will always be remembered as the Swedish Marilyn Monroe. But why is Errol Flynn remembered for all the wrong reasons? Watch this video.